Hi, everybody. It's me, Skelton, with another vlog chat for you. I would like to talk about a more serious topic. This has to do with losing a parent at a young age. And I lost my mother to cancer when I was 11 years old in the summer of 1990. And it was a very difficult experience for me, and I think it's affected me deeply throughout the years. And I know that it's part of growing and healing is learning about these things and how they affect people. But I think the biggest part about losing a parent at such a young age is that most young children don't expect to lose their parents when they're young. We usually deal with elderly parents, and we have more time to prepare. And it's pretty hard to lose a parent at any age. But I think that when you're a child, you really don't expect a parent, especially when your parents are only in their early 50s, that they will pass so young and leave you sort of stranded. And that's how I felt many years. I felt sort of like that warmth, security blanket had been pulled out from under me, and I had no security left. My world was pretty shaken. So I was pretty close to my mother, and the hardest thing is I felt I didn't get to spend enough time with her on earth. But I do know through revelation that God has given me that I will see her in heaven. So that's sort of why I'm going to talk about it, and how I learned the truth about why this had to happen in my life. So my mother was doing pretty well, and she started getting these vague symptoms in the late 80s, like she would have lower back pain and not, feel sort of vague achiness and tiredness. And the doctor said, well, just go for long walks, and that seemed to help. But by Christmas 1990, or Christmas 89, Christmas 1989, I was in the fifth grade, and I noticed my mother. She said, oh, I just feel so tired. And my mother usually had tons of energy, and she was always doing things like decorating the house for Christmas. And this one Christmas, she was feeling really bad. And that New Year's, 1990, we had gone down to Richmond, and we're staying at the Jefferson Hotel. And my mother was, she was getting worse, and she wasn't able to eat really or keep food down. She was throwing up and having all kinds of gastrointestinal system problems. And so she just kept getting worse and worse, and the doctors didn't know anything about it, and they said, well, maybe you have hepatitis. And they thought she got hepatitis from eating shellfish, which was unlikely. Or they thought she had hepatitis, the kind that hookers get and prostitutes. And my mother wasn't a heroin user or a prostitute, so none of this added up. They just didn't know what to do, what was wrong with her. And then the doctor said something very flippant. He said, well, once your button's been pushed, it's been pushed. And she almost punched him for that, but the doctors just weren't doing their job. But they probably didn't know. The symptoms were still very, very vague and hard to figure out. But eventually, at one point, my mother did get jaundice, and so we took her to the emergency room in Leesburg at Loudoun County Hospital, and that's when the doctor said, "Okay, we're going to do some more tests," and they had her drink barium, which is the stuff you drink that goes, illuminates your insides, I believe. And they did some more tests, and they discovered that she did have a growth there, and believed it was in the pancreas area. And they said, we can't do anything for you here. You need to go to Georgetown University Hospital. So in early 1990, my mother went over to Georgetown. They did surgery on her, and they discovered that there was a tumor, but they could not remove it. The cancer had already metastasized at that point. So the head surgeon spoke to us and said, we are looking at a time frame, which really meant it was terminal. There was nothing they could do. And she had about 6 months to live. So we went through a period where my mother was on radiation treatment therapy. They put her through all kinds of radiation. It didn't do much for her at all. But at this point, she did have periods of remission where some days she'd feel better and that sort of thing. And so, but she was getting closer to God at this point, and she was letting go of a lot of things in her life that she realized were so trivial and and not worth being upset over. She had so many things that were upsetting her, and she was letting this go. And my grandmother was praying deeply for her salvation, but I was praying that my mother would be healed of cancer, that God would heal her, and I didn't understand why he wasn't or why he didn't. And so as the cancer progressed, I was going back and forth to the hospital sometimes after school, and I would see my mother, and sometimes she'd be incoherent because she was so drugged up from the painkillers. They were giving her morphine and all that. But after a point, they said, well, why not just send her home and she can die peacefully at home? So she was with hospice care, and eventually she did pass. It was July 21st, 1990. I remember that day very well because it had been raining all day. It was really hot. It had been raining all day, and I was down in the basement listening to the oldie station. I was listening to Have You Ever Seen the Rain, I believe, by Creedence Clearwater Revival. And then I got word that my mother had died, and I did have a chance to say goodbye to her before she died, and I told her that she was good mother and all that. So we went through the process, and we had her funeral, and invited family, and all that sort of thing that you go through. But I witnessed some things that were very disturbing. I saw the ambulance came, and they took her away, and she was in the body bag, and that was very difficult for me. I wish I hadn't seen that. And I heard the death rattle, and I heard what death sounds like. But years passed, and I was still angry with God. Even after I became a Christian, I didn't understand why he allowed her to get sick and why she wasn't healed. And it was revealed to me that the only way that she could go to heaven was to get the illness so that she could become saved, because I don't know if she had lost salvation or what happened, but she had so many things that were keeping her separate from God, and the illness allowed her to get right with God, and God in his infinite wisdom and his mercy allowed that to happen so that my mother would be with the Lord in heaven, and that gives me such peace in my heart, because I know someday I'll get to see my mother again in heaven with the Lord. And so that's really gives me peace in my heart, makes me feel better, and it gives me a broader understanding, because I know that my mother had so many things that she was upset over in her life, and God allowed her to go through this. She had to work through it, and he forced her to work through it by giving her this cancer. And that was the only way that she could go to heaven. And my grandmother, who was a devout Christian, was praying for her salvation, to be saved, and this is how it worked. And so I'm just so glad that my mother is in heaven. So that's the story that I went through of losing a parent at an early age. It just sort of shifted my worldview, but in a sense it gave me a better sense of who I am, but also it took a long time to go through my identity problems, and I learned at an early age that life is short, and many people that are young feel they're invincible, but I learned death is imminent, and this is what I went through, losing a parent at 11 years old, not knowing that this had a broader purpose, that God was using this for both her life and my life. And so I just want to share that. I do have to say that this really kind of did mess up my life in many ways. In fact, I do feel that it set me back almost 5 or 10 years, because I thought that growing up and becoming adult meant leaving, as no longer a child, I'd be leaving my mother by being an adult, because it happened when I was a child. But no, that's not true. It just took me a long time to adjust, and I'm just so glad that the Lord revealed this to me, because it was a question I had for many years. So anyway, as I go through, I never forget my mother. I always remember her. She was very artistic, very creative person, very strong-willed, and she had a lot of talent, but she died very young, and some people won't be on this earth very long, but we can learn from these things. So I just want to say, though, I still think it is very hard to lose a parent when you're a child, it really does shake up your world, and it takes away your security that that you're used to. And that really did affect me on a deep level. But it'll always be there, sort of like a scar on our hearts. You know, it will always be there. But at least it gives me comfort to know that this had a broader purpose and that God was using it for good. So that's just my story. I want to share with everybody about losing a parent as a child and what that meant for me. And I hope maybe that will help some people who are going through grief to know that everything has a purpose, that God can use all kinds of travesties and tumultuous situations to work for good. So thank you all for watching. Be sure and go to my website at meetskeltonsplace.com, and I'll be coming back to you with a live stream, more live streams, and more music vlogs where I'll be doing some on the road vlogs. Thank you all for watching. Till next time, God bless you. Bye.